Listen, we don't need no lecture today. We just had it. We just had it. The music. We have a special presentation. Daryl Allen Reed is an award-winning professional actor who has enjoyed sharing his craft in all aspects of his performance spectrum: film, radio, television, and his first love, theater, for which he's been awarded with appreciative audiences, awards including the NAACP Ovation, Joseph Jefferson, Gay Chicago Magazine, and Black Theater Alliance. Today, in reference to this month's theme of emerging as my Christ self, Daryl is performing an excerpt from a scene of his upcoming one-man show. The title of the scene, Martin Luther King's Integration into My Life, which explores the influence and coincidences of the civil rights leader woven throughout his own life. Let us welcome our Daryl Allen Reed.
Thank you. Thank you much. Thank you, Reverend Lisa, Ms. Miles. That was wonderful. That was wonderful. That's my daddy's name, Miles. Just want to say. And you know, Dr. King always had some music involved because, as you see, it opens everybody up. It makes everybody feel the spirit, and that was wonderful. Thank you for doing that. Thank you. Okay, and did I ever tell you guys that I had a chance to go on Broadway? I was invited to go on Broadway. Well, I'll tell you in a minute, but I got to give you a little background first. First of all, I want to talk about my parents because that's the basis of my upbringing. Basically, they met in Omaha, Nebraska. They had 2 kids before me. I was the firstborn in Chicago. Now, in Chicago, it's 1958 is when I was born. So what I wanted to talk about is in this teaching here, we always hear, and I've heard a few of the reverends mention, some things are taught and some are caught. And so from my parents, I learned a lot of things that they taught me. But some things I caught that helped me as I was about to endeavor into my own personal, as I was going out into my own individually. And first of all is character. The second was a sense of style. And third is a love of language and words. And now some of the coincidences of my parents and Martin Luther King, it's about 5 of them. They were all 3 born in the South, all 3 born in January. And my dad and King were born in the 20s. My mom was born on his birthday. Happy birthday, Mom. And both my dad and Reverend King were called ML. So I mentioned things about names because this is one of the things that got me interested in Martin Luther King. It was 1966. He had come to Chicago because he was dramatizing the whole, not employment, but housing. They were doing a thing called redlining in Chicago where they were steering blacks away from certain communities, and it was become a big problem. When he came up there in 66, that was the worst treatment out of all the things that he had gone through in the South. That was the worst treatment he had, was when he came to Chicago, and he would tell you later on about that. I remember seeing some of the things about it, but he eventually, I found out, lived there. He came to live in Chicago to help dramatize the situation. That was in 1966. And on the radio, they started saying, I'm 8 years old, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. will be speaking, and all this excitement was being generated. I'm like, well, I want to go see this Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I kept telling my dad, I want to go see Reverend, because I like the names. He had like 5, 6 names, right? So I'm like, I want to see the Reverend, this guy got to be important. I want to see the Reverend. So we go to the rally. We go down to the amphitheater in Chicago, and watching all these people walk in, and I'm saying to my dad, I can't wait to see the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Can't wait to see him. I'm saying it, and I'm inside. We were watching this. They had all these, it was a lot of excitement, a lot of different speakers, a lot of people. And then at one point I said, Daddy, I want to see the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He said, Daryl, that's him right there. I was like, I mean, this king didn't have no regalia. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he was smaller than I thought. He was kind of light-skinned. I was like, that's not who and now ask me what he talked about. I don't know. I was 8 years old. I was all caught up in the excitement of it, you know. But what it made me do is realize that, you know, I was in tune to something. And my dad also just pulled me along because I expressed interest. He didn't know that I wasn't going for the, you know, for the edification of it all. It wasn't because of the names, but it was, again, my love of language. And so pushed to 1968, Thursday, April 4th, watching my mom react to the news that was on the radio. And going to school the next morning, not even being able to go into my class before my teachers pulled me aside. They give me the sheet of paper. On the top of it says, "Then my living would not be in vain." My assignment, I had to go around to all the classes in my school and read this, "Then my living would not be in vain." And I'm reading it, I'm like, this dude wrote this? And it was from Martin Luther King, right? And it was basically from his drum major instinct speech. That it wasn't a speech, it was a sermon. It was done exactly 2 months before he died. So it was one of his last sermons. And he talked about a myriad of things, but one of the things that came out towards the end was how he wanted to be remembered and everything. So this is what I had to do at 8 years old, walking around, or 10 years old, walking around to all the classes, talking about this. So I'm looking at these words, and I fell in love with this man and how he wrote this. And I'm just enamored. And later on, I started hearing different things, and eventually I started doing my own career. I go, and in 1994, I had a really good, 93, 94, I did a play that eventually got my first theater award. Then I did a Martin episode out here. It was 93. And then I found out that I was having my only son. And so when I got back to Chicago in 94, what I didn't mention is prior to that I had done a show, 2 shows at Steppenwolf Theater. Now they have some very famous cast members, members of that group that you've seen on Hollywood and whatever. But anyway, they helped me because they cast me in a show that got me my equity card, which is my union card. I did a show that got me my LA agent. And this time they came back to me after my child is 3 months old to say, look, the Song of Jacob Zulu, which was a show that had done real well. It featured Lady Smith Black Mambazo and done real well in Chicago. They were about to take it to Broadway. And they were offering me a chance to go with them. But the offer was to understudy Zakes Mokai, who you probably know. He's a very well-known South African actor. But in the meantime, to be a chorus member, which basically means I'll probably be the third spear holder on the left, in the back. At the same time, about 2 weeks later, while I was considering it, and my wife and I was like, no, our son is too young to go, because they were going to Sydney, Australia for 2 weeks, then to Broadway. And it was very, very, very tempting. But with my son being the age he was, it just wasn't the time to be taking him out and around and all of that. And so we thought about it. In the meantime, I got a notice about a play that was being done as a tour. It was going to be Marvin Gaye, Tammy Terrell. It's called Perfect Duet. Now, this has been the 3rd time I'd auditioned for something that was a musical, but I didn't have to sing. I'm not a singer, but I went to the audition anyway because it was exposing me. It was going on the north side, which was a lot more people. So I get to the audition, and the lady hands me, she says, well, do your song. I'm like, love has played this game on me so long, I started to believe I never find anyone. And so, I'm doing a little something. She says, okay. She turns her head to the side and goes, here, look at this. She gave me this 3 sheets of paper, right? It's all typed up. A lot of X's on it, a lot of written out, everything, it's just been, been edited. And I'm reading it, I'm like, one of the things I noticed, I'm like, I think this is Martin Luther King. And I'm thinking about it, and I really knew because when I got to one of the paragraphs, it said something about Ralph Abernathy. Then I knew. I said, okay. So I had some observations and some questions. The first thing is, this is King. Second, what correlation is there between Marvin and Tammy and Martin Luther King? Now I do know, like Sam Cooke, a lot of celebrities aided in the whole the civil rights movement, but I couldn't figure that out. And I know I didn't look or sound anything like them, so I didn't know what she wanted. But the student in me says, I want to show her that I understand the assignment. And the actor in me says, somebody's going to get this role. It might as well be me. So I'm looking at it, and I take it, and I'm just reading it. And then she gives it to me, and then she tells me to go and look at it. And then she comes back before I'm even finished with it. And she said, I just want to get a feel for what it is, and I still don't understand. So basically, I'm reading it. It says, but I know somehow that only when it is dark enough, because it's been deeply redacted, right? Scratch out it everywhere. I have to follow it. But I know somehow that only when it's dark enough can we see the stars. And I see God working in this period of the 20th century in a way that men in some strange way are responding. Something is happening in our world. The masses of people are rising up, and wherever they are assembled today, whether they are in Nairobi, Kenya, Accra, Ghana, Jackson, Mississippi, New York City, Atlanta, Georgia, or Memphis, Tennessee, the cry is always the same. We want to be free. Men for years now have been talking about war and peace. But now no longer can we just talk about it. There's no longer a choice between violence and nonviolence in this world. It's nonviolence or non-existence. I can remember when Ralph was going around and talking about how black folks used to laugh when they were not tickled, scratch when they did not itch. But that day is all over. We mean business now, and we are determined to take our rightful place in God's world. And that's all we are saying. We are not engaged in any negative protests and any negative arguments with anybody. We are saying that we are determined to be men. We are determined to be people. We are saying that we are God's children, and we don't have to live the way we are being forced to live. And that means that we have got to stay together. We've got to stay together and maintain unity. But when a people gets caught up in doing that which is right and are willing to sacrifice for it, there is no stopping point short of victory. Now, we are poor people. Individually, we are poor. When you compare us with white society in America, we are poor people. But never stop and forget that collectively, we are richer than all the nations of the world with the exception of 9. Yeah. Did you know that? Yes, after you leave the United States, Great Britain, United States, Great Britain, Germany, France, I can name the others. The Negro collectively is richer than most nations of the world. We have an annual income of over $30 billion a year. That is more than the national product of Canada. That's more than all the exports of the United States. That's power right there if we know how to pool it. Now, let me say, as I move to my conclusion, we got to see this thing through to the end. You got to be there. When we have our march, you need to be there. Be concerned about your brother. Because either we go up together or we go down together. Let us rise tonight with greater readiness. Let us stand with greater determination. Let us move on in these powerful days, these days of challenge to make America what it ought to be. We have an opportunity to make America a better nation. And I want to thank God once again for allowing me to be here with you. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And I am happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Darrell Allen Reed as Martin. That was a good Martin. Whew, I got some tough acts to follow this morning. Emerging as my Christ self. Spirit in chapter 3. But before we get into that, I have a little funny for you. It says that Father Murphy walked into a pub and asked the first young man that he met, "Do you want to go to heaven?" And the young man said yes. Father Murphy went to a second and third young man and said, "Do you want to go to heaven?" And they said yes. And he said, "Well, go stand over there up against the wall." He went to a fourth young man and he said, "Young man, do you want to go to heaven?" And he said, "No." And the father said, I don't believe that when you perish, you don't want to go to heaven. He said, oh, well, when I perish, I want to go to heaven. He said, but look like them you have up against the wall. Look like you're trying to get a group to go right now. Emerging as my Christ self. Martell and I was having a conversation this week on emerging. And she really was probing me to really explain to her what emerging meant. So she really had me to go and take a deeper look as to what emerging really means. We also talked about the word merging. And then the question of what does the M from merging represent? So I did a little investigation and I looked up emerging and merging. And it was said that emerging is when you use a platform to come into your own. Merging is when you sacrifice who you are to become part of something else. And I say, look at all the companies that are merging, that they are separating themselves from the individual and they're coming together, giving up who they are to come together with something else. So both words speaks to our theme. We are merging. That means we are sacrificing ourselves to be a part of the Christ self. And we are emerging on that platform, that opportunity to come into our divinity, our sonship, and our daughtership. So to merge with that one, to become and recognize your part in God, because there's only one and we all are a part of it. We are emerging to find out exactly who we are and whose we are. Genesis 25:23 says, 2 nations are in your womb. The Lord responded, and 2 separate people will emerge. One people will be stronger and the older will serve the younger. And it was speaking on Rebekah's pregnancy with the twins, Jacob and Esau, the 2 nations. But for us, that means 2 streams of consciousness. The natural law of evolution. The physical man, Esau, materialistic. The sense part of us that only lasts but so long. Esau was brought forth first, having precedence over the intellectual side of us, which is Jacob. Jacob is the intellectual side. Esau is the material side. And so when we emerge, are we emerging in the intellect, the wisdom of God, or are we emerging with that materialistic side? Now, both are wonderful. But if you do not have your spiritual sense of yourself, any material thing won't do you no good, because you will always be chasing after something else. We have to be rooted and grounded in the Spirit. God created us individually, gave us his DNA, that image and likeness, did not want to control us, gave us freedom to discover the spiritual laws for ourselves. And that makes decision to improve our lives, to be an example to others, to improve their lives, not by force, but by a natural, organic unfoldment. See, we're always trying to tell people what to do, but the first person you got to work with is self. This thing that we're living is an inside job. And when people don't respond or do what we want them to do, then we get an attitude. Then we get mad. And what does that do for your life? Trying to control another. We can't even control our 2-year-olds. They do what they want to do. But the best thing we can do is have that intellect and teach. Be an example. Allow your light to shine. That requires each of us taking the time to recognize our spiritual abilities and the nature of God within. And by nature, I mean God's word and our teaching reminds us our spiritual nature involves the recognition of a sense, a belief, and a trust that there is something greater than ourselves, something more to just being human, something more than our sensory perception and our experiences. Our nature is an awakening to a greater whole of which we are a part of. Our divine nature, remember, we have choice and dominion. That truth assists us in emerging as our Christ self. The recognition of our nature shall speak to our faith. If we are not tested in the classroom of life, then how are we going to measure our faith? See, it's only when something happens in your life that you are required to practice what you preach, to practice what you say you believe in, to practice when you pray, to practice when you meditate. This is the opportunity to do it. So if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. And staying ready is us taking time every single day to commune and sup with God. Every day. There should not be a day that goes by that you don't commune with your Father, with your Creator. Goodness, readiness, availability of ourselves, our mind, body, and soul, our time, our gift, and our treasure. I am emerging as my Christ self. In Job 23:10, it said, "Yet he knows the way I have taken. When he has tested me, I will emerge as pure gold." Now, God don't have to test us. God already knows who we are. But sometimes we feel like we're being tested. But the testing is on your own behalf. You're testing yourself to see where you are in your spiritual walk. This is us asking, where is God in the midst of my issue, of my pain? Where is God? We should be asking, where is my faith in the midst of this? That's what we should be asking. Where is my trust and my belief in the midst of this? God has not moved. God has been there all the time. Just hold on. A change is coming. Don't you worry about a thing. God is always with us, but only in our look upon God will God be able to change the thinking about a thing. For then the thing changes, emerging, coming out of that thing of what you need. We're talking about a renewal. And if you look at the word renewal, the R-E is to do it again. And then the new is right there in the middle. And then A-L, I say all. The renewal. But the renewing has to happen that heart center, in the very soul of the depth of our being. That's where the change has to take place. And when that change takes place on the inside, then you see the picture on the outside of what you're feeling, what you're thinking. Means let's try this again. Job was saying in that brief paragraph, I don't want to talk to God, I want to hear from God. So, Father, what is happening here? That stream of consciousness is wrestling with your faith and something we can't see physically. But each of us getting to that threshold where we know something is happening spiritually. Emerging as my Christ self, Job continues to say, I shall come out as gold. Coming out of the challenge, the trial, the tribulation, refined. The power of God, the fire purifies. See, the fire of God purifies the soul. We want to be burning with that feeling of the Spirit of God. And that will restore and renew, and then I am golden. And I love Isaiah 49, 9, 10. And Isaiah is representing our higher self. And it says, you will say to the prisoners, come out. And to those who are in dark places, emerge. Graze beside the road on all the slopes that they will find the pastor. So to the captives, whatever we may be captivated by, anything other than our Christ self, come out emerge, and to those in darkness, be free. Isaiah was saying they will feed beside the roads and find a pasture on every barren hill, meaning we will neither hunger nor thirst, nor will the desert heat beat us down. I am emerging as my Christ self, my higher self. I have located that power within that allows me to let go of the lesser. Those things that we remember, our experiences that we continue to hold on to, free that subconscious, that memory bank, as practitioner Beverly was talking about. Get that stuff out of you. Make room for newness. Make room for your Christ self to stand up and praise your Heavenly Father. I am emerging as my Christ self. It is says when we begin to fine-tune our understanding of the Christ self, we shall eventually come to an awareness that our ability to experience God can happen anytime, anywhere. See, we're using the power one way or the other. There's one power, but you have choice and dominion to use that power however you want to. It's not about being where someone else is. It's about being in that Christ presence all the time. When we can recognize God in anything and everything and anyone and everyone, we free ourselves. Yes. See, we're bound because of people, streams of consciousness. Free yourself from worrying about anybody else. They talk about keeping up with the Joneses. That journey may be rough sometime, but that's life. And this is the biggest classroom we will ever be in, the classroom of life. Learn your lessons so you can get your blessings. We each have a divine purpose. The challenges, the trials, the unexpected whatevers came to let you know how powerful you are and how much more we can be. See, if you didn't go through nothing, you wouldn't know nothing. If you ain't been through nothing, you can't tell me nothing. If you ain't been tested, you don't have a testimony. The Christ self has always moved to prepare us, to not get shaken or rattled. For God, our Christ self, is always there in the moment of need. We just have to recognize it, unify with it, realize that it's possible, be grateful in the midst of it, and then let go and let God. That's why there's a word of God, the pastor, the practitioner, inspirational passages, nature, to remind us there is that power that is great and the stuff that we have and the stuff that we think we need. There is something greater. We are surrounded and immersed in the blessings of God, that power, that divine energy that is whole in its essence and complete in its works. The presence of God is impossible to avoid. While we sleep, God is there. When awakened, God is there. As we move through our day, God is there. When we lay our head down at night, God is there. And when you learn to cleanse from the day and be free, you can sleep better. And the body can start to heal. See, when you go to sleep with your fist balled up, the body is tight. The cells don't respond. Muscles and organs don't respond to the nature of your being. We got to go to sleep free. A lot of us don't get peaceful night's sleep. And it's more than just those 1,000 channels that they have on TV. Y'all stay up watching. It is the things that are in our consciousness, things that are in our subconsciousness that keeps us bound. See, this platform is for us to be freer each time we come and leave. To not leave here the same that you came in. Something has to happen. I don't care how boring the speaker is. Something got to move you. Either the music, the word, or truth. Got to move you. The presence of God. Ernest Holmes reminds us the Spirit, the Father, the Creator, can only do for us what we allow God to do through us. Unless we are able to provide the consciousness, the belief, faith, and trust, God cannot make the gift. It's like ordering something and not having access to the delivery. You ask for something. You pray for something. You vision something. But you have to be the avenue in which it can come through. So to merge in our Christ self is to give access to God's wisdom, power, love, kindness, joy, and peace. All of God's attributes and the principles of what we're studying. How do we provide the consciousness? By realizing we have the power to attract, positioning ourselves in a receptive mode. We have the power to attract. We are magnets. And you keep wondering why the same kind of people keep coming your way. Because you are a magnet for it. You want something different? You got to think something different. You got to attract something different by changing your consciousness. Be grateful for the journey and have the willingness to take the steps to get there. When we think, as Jesus told us, the master teacher, as a man and a woman thinketh, so it is. And we think sometimes empty thoughts, and we don't think that it means anything, but every thought means something. And the universe is going to respond accordingly. It doesn't care who you are, how nice you are, how much money you make, how beautiful or handsome you are. The laws don't care about that. It will rain on the just and the unjust. Get your thinking straight. Get it in a line with who God created you to be. In other words, where our thoughts are rooted, there is the fruit. Sweet and good or weeds. You get to choose. Listen, God becomes personalized in every man and woman when we choose to allow it to live within us. God is not outside somewhere or up in the sky. God is right here representing you and me. This is how God gets around with our legs and feet. That's how the wisdom of God comes out as all the things that we see. Technical and all of that is because the wisdom of God. It ain't just for some, it's for all who are willing to accept the power of God within. We are not powerless people. We are powerful. More powerful than we could ever imagine. Dip into the well and pull out what you believe you can handle. I come to awaken us. There is no one on this planet that has no more or less spiritual creative power than you or me. Nobody is greater. We are equal in God's eyes. It's only this human stuff that divides us and then eventually conquers us. Unity brings the whole. In the speech that we just heard, that's what Martin Luther King was teaching, is to come together. By ourselves, we wander around, but together, we can move mountains. Amen? Amen. There was a Dr. Jane Holt, and I was reading something in her book. It's called In the Crossing the Threshold, in Crossing the Threshold. She says, standing bound for so long, not even noticing I could move, an awareness, an unconscious push just below the surface of the mind, urging me and moving me forward, ensues that the struggle and the fight I put there, I live resisting limitation and striving for freedom. That was always a thought, a decision, a way. So everything we want, everything we desire, how we want to live is only a decision away. Only a thought away. Only a step away from us. We have to fight to get nothing. All we have to do is be. She said, knowing my God self, my Christ self of who I am, I release where the stuff, the trials, the tribulations, I release them so they can fall away. Where nothing in my consciousness holds them in place. Nothing in our consciousness should be holding anything less than a wonderful thought, a divine thought, a loving thought. Because if you continue to put so much in that consciousness, it becomes a trash can. Take the trash out. It is told to us to be at peace at all times. No one is capable of making us upset without our consent. No one is capable of making us upset without our consent. We choose how we react or respond. Good is at the root of everything because it's all God. When God gave us choice with that power, we were able to use according to our thinking. And of course, we base it on our experiences. What happened yesteryear? We then brought all of that trash, all of that past, right into our future, right into our present moment. I tell y'all all the time, leave the past exactly where it is. In the past. Be in your now and pray for your future. Take the time to realize your spiritual nature. By nature, we are creative beings, for the Spirit of God is within. By nature, we are dynamic individuals with the capacity to attune our thinking to divine ideas and express these ideas in the world in which we live. By nature, we have the capacity to achieve, to do, to meet our highest good face to face. By nature, remembering when things appear out of sorts, we have the means to know something greater, for we are made in its image and its likeness. So since we, by nature, are co-creators with God, we have the ability to cause something to be, and that's by choice. Amen? Amen. We have the means and ability to bring into expression our good, our healing, see everything that comes into our experience as an opportunity for us to grow. Blessings or continued lessons. You get to choose. Emerge as your Christ self. Amen. And so it is.